Alright, we're going to try to do this. Well, that was interesting. So we're going to erase this. And we'll see if my little cursor is going to, my pen is going to work, so I don't have to try to do it with the mouse. So we'll go here to pen. Yeah, it looks like it's going to. Okay. When we expand each binomial, what that means is we're going to take x, and I need to make this a narrower line, x plus 3 times x plus 3. That's what x plus 3 squared is. Let me get back here to a narrower line. Don't need that big old line. All right, when I FOIL this or double distribute, you have x times x gives you x squared, plus x times 3, 3x. Then we're going to distribute here, plus 3x again, and plus 9. And so the final results are x squared plus 6x plus 9. Okay. Now if I have x minus 5 squared, again it's x minus 5 times x minus 5, and that'll be x squared minus 5x minus 5x again, and plus 25, which multiplies to be x squared minus 10x plus 25. All right, now let's factor. Let's go the other way. That's multiplying. Let's factor. If we're going to factor, remember we need first element in each parentheses is going to be x. Everything's positive here, so it's going to be plus and plus. We need something that will multiply to be 64, add to be 16. Well, that will be 8 and 8. 8 times 8 is 16. 8 plus 8 is 8 times 8 is 64. 8 plus 8 is 16. So that's the same as x plus 8 squared. Here we have x times x will give me the x squared. Factors that multiply to be 36, add to be negative 12 are going to be negative 6 and negative 6. So this factors is x minus 6 squared. So all four of these are examples of are examples of perfect square polynomials. And so what we have to notice what happens in a perfect square polynomial. In all four of these things, if you will notice, you have the middle term. If you take the square root of the last term, in this case that's 8, multiply it by 2, you get the middle term. Square root of 9 is 3, multiplied by 2 is 6. Square root of, if I divide this by 2 on the other hand, I have a negative 5, square it and I get 25. Okay, here, negative 6, square it and get 36. So, in terms, for all four of these, in terms of B, C is the middle term divided by 2, and then it is squared. And that's the key. That's really the main thing you have to know about completing the square. And we're going to go through and give some examples for this on how to do it. So let me move on down the page. Okay, get up here. And this is going to be our first example. But the first thing is what term is needed to complete the square. Okay, well let's think. What did we do? We need, the term that's needed to complete the square would be 8 divided by 2 squared. So what that term would be in that blank, we can either say 8 divided by 2 squared, or it would be 4 squared, or 16. So that's the term that is needed to complete the square. Now, how do you go about completing the square? Well, let's do that. First, move the constant to the other side. So what we have here, we have x squared plus 6x, and the 8, we're going to subtract 8 from both sides, so you end up with negative 8 on the other side of the equal sign. Now we're going to complete the square. So let's write in what we have. We have x squared plus 6x, and we have our negative 8 over here. We're going to figure out what goes in those blanks in order to complete our square. So remember, you divide the middle term by 2, so it's 6 divided by 2 squared, okay, which in other words is, I'm just going to erase that, 6 divided by 2 is 3, okay, but we have the reason there's another blank over here is what we add on one side we have to add on the other, or we've changed the equation. So we added a value of 9, 3 squared, so we're going to add a value of 9 over here. Now usually I leave this as whatever that divided by 2 squared, because what happens is when you do that, that number is exactly what comes down for writing the trinomial as a perfect square. You have x plus 3 squared. That's what this would factor as x plus 3 squared. And then you add these two, negative 8 plus 9 will give you 1. And so we have successfully completed the square of this polynomial right here. All right, so let's do a few more examples. A couple of them are a little harder. And I'm going to show you on one of them too how this is used to solve. If you had to solve a quadratic instead of using the quadratic formula, perhaps. All right. Now, here's a big hint or a big question. This is very important, number 2. Divide everything by the coefficient of x squared. If it is not x squared, you have to make it x squared. So, first it says move the constant. I usually divide by the coefficient first. And I'll show you that in a minute. So we add 16 across. 4x squared plus 8x equals 16. Now we're going to divide everything by 4. So you have x squared plus 2x equals 4. Now I have the x squared, which is what I want. I don't want any kind of coefficient in front of my squared term. So in here, in step 3, we're ready to complete the square. So we write what we have, and we figure out what's going to go in the blanks to complete the squares. Well, 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 1 squared is 1. So when we bring this down, we have x plus 1 squared, remember that comes right down into this blank, equals 5. And we have completed the square. Okay. Now let's look at number 7 here, and I'm going to move this up. Hopefully move it up enough to, whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. I want to go to the mouse, wherever that is. There it is. Okay, and we are going to move it up as high as we can. Go back to the pen. All right, complete the square. All right, now I don't do quite as many steps. There's nothing wrong with doing all those steps, but the way I usually write this is I write it x squared plus 8x plus blank. Remember, I go ahead and I'm going to go and skip to that second step, equals negative 7, because we add the 7 across, and it's negative 7 plus blank, because remember, we have whatever we put on this side, on the left, we have to add to the right. So what goes in here? It's 8 divided by 2, which is 4 squared. 4 squared is 16, so we have to add 16 to the right. So now we're going to mark this as a perfect square. That's x plus 4 squared equals 16 minus 7 is 9. Now this is you're done. If the instructions are completing the square, complete the square, then you're finished with this. And that's what it's going to take when we do get things into standard form. But what if I had the instructions to solve this quadratic, and maybe we didn't want to do the quadratic formula, or we couldn't factor very easily or something, you know, whatever. So you can complete the square, and what you'll have then is you'll take the square root of both sides. So you would take the square root of x plus 4 squared, and that's equal to the square root of 9. When you take the square root of x plus 4 squared, you have x plus 4 equals plus or minus 3. Then you add the 4 across, so x is equal to negative 4 plus or minus 3. So the solution would be x equals negative 4 plus 3, or negative 1, and x equals negative 4 minus 3, or negative 7. Now, you're not going to have to do that. This is just strictly, you could have to use that on Accuplacer. You will definitely be using it in college algebra. So that's just an example of how you would also use completing the square for solving a quadratic equation. So let's look at 8. Now, the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to divide everything by 5, because remember, I have to have no coefficient in front of the x squared. So that's going to leave me with x squared minus 4x plus 3 equals 0. Now let's get ready to remove the 3 over and put our blanks in that we're going to fill in. X squared minus 4x plus blank equals negative 3 plus blank. Negative 3 comes, 3 added, negative 3 to both sides comes across as a negative 3. All right, so negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2 squared, and negative 2 squared is positive 4. So now when I bring that down, remember you bring this number exactly, so it's x minus 2 squared. If I factor that as a perfect square, equals 1, and that I'm finished. I have completed the square of that original polynomial. So that's what you're going to do in 10.1. You need to work the rest of the section, the rest of the class on completing the 2 homework assignments you've been given.